have been particularly excited about this session today. And I'm so, So, I mean, the theme of this session is about what is the social in the pedagogy. We're really looking at that aspect because I think as we've been talking all morning about all of these social aspects, I think that's one of the questions that's really been raised, and we got a lot of great information in the last session about what types of social aspects that music may influence. And so I thought it would be really great for all of us to have a chance to really see some music in action. And also with students, right? Students are a part of this. This is a university, and so this is something both Jonathan and I working in universities together when we were talking about this, just being such an important part of this experience. This is an educational experience for everyone that's here, and in a sense, actually, everybody on stage right now is a presenter, which is awesome. And so just looking at this question, what is the social in the pedagogy? And that is what we're really going to be getting at. And Jonathan is going to lead us through some activities with orchestra specifically, and then we will have our three responders come up, and they may broaden the conversation beyond the orchestra. So, yes, Larry.
Your poll about music and social impact within the music making process is now on your computer. So see if you can find it and take the poll. It lists things that you predict, and you might be able to verify after we get done with the session the types of things that come out of music. Imagine social impact being measured by what comes out of the music making process, including rehearsals and so forth. Have you found the poll? Has anybody found the poll? Yes. Okay, so it exists. It was sent to everyone. And so this one will take more than a minute to fill out. It's a rating scale, I believe. Is that true? Is this a rating scale poll? No. All right, then it'll be a little quicker. All right, as soon as we're done with that, then enjoy the presentation. And one way to think about it is, again, what is evidence for social process, social impact in the music making process? So give us 1 minute and we'll be done. If you finish the poll, please raise your hand. And allow another 15 seconds or so. I don't want you to miss anything here while you're taking the poll.
You think you could post it on today's meet because I didn't get the email.
Okay. Where did you find it? Where did you find it?
You have to refresh the page.
In today's
In today's email.
Today's meet.
Today's meet?
Refresh.
Yeah. Are we done? Not yet? Okay.
With the wait then.
still going? Okay.
Jonathan. Thank you, Brian. Can you hear me? Yes. I'm glad to hear that. Forgive the hyperbolic title above me. It wasn't originally that, but then my students were giggling about the fact that I had a little Superman curl going in front of my forehead, and I got rid of the curl, but I had to change the title as a result. I'm really happy that this morning one of the themes, or the first themes that we identified, was the fact that we have embedded institutions within music making that we know are problematic. The symphony orchestra, large ensemble, wind ensemble, the choir, that there is an issue with them that is something we haven't yet to resolve. A paradox, if you will, between what we know to be the ensemble as a vehicle for social potential, or the potential for social impact, versus what it usually is in practice, which is the most antisocial mode of cultural expression. I introduced myself this morning as an Abreu Fellow, a Sistema Fellow, and I am a conductor as well. For me, it was very important on a personal and professional level that I find a way to reconcile this paradox, that it not simply be entertained, but that it be resolved on the level of practice, if for no other reason than I not be a hypocrite, that I profess social change, but then I act, as Richardson says above, in an anti-social, non-democratic manner. So I'm talking really about a social approach to an ensemble. And a social approach, just to give you a definition, it was one that would involve social learning principles. And I'll expand on that shortly. But as part of that, emphasizing the fact that this can function as a social entity, that there are interdependencies, that there are relationships in them, and if we approach musical problems from the perspective of these interdependencies, then we can have potentially social outcomes. Just to introduce the orchestra, it's about half, or about one-third students from UNC Charlotte, the other coming from Orchids and from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. This is their first session together. They're going to be sight reading this repertoire. We have not rehearsed, we have not prepared in any way. Some students know me, some of them don't. Some of them know how I work, some of them are probably a little nervous and a little worried. I want to reassure them this is very low impact, very low stress for you. The stress is on me to make it work. And as a very important point that Brian mentioned, we want to hear from them. This is the voice that is unheard, the voice of the participant in the experience. I can tell you how brilliant my plans are. They may turn around and say, I didn't get it, and it was awful. And that is fair game. That is important, an important part of the process here. One last note. If you're expecting Gustavo Dudamel, I just don't have the hair. This is not about that. This is not about me as a conductor. I am facing you only to make it more convenient for me to converse with you and the orchestra at the same time so that you can hear my instructions. This is really about them. There will not be an awful lot to watch, but please keep your ears very open. This is where I hope to demonstrate some of the transformation. We're going to start with an excerpt from Mozart Symphony number 38 in D major, Prague Symphony, and we're going to start right at the very beginning. Together. You can blame me as a conductor. We're going to look at a very simple strategy to help you be together. I don't want you to follow me. Yes, I said that. I don't want you to follow me. I would like you to reflect my emotion and move with me. So we will give the downbeat together, and then as we give the preparation for the triplet grouping, we're going to give that together too. For the cellos, it might be in the arms. For the violins and violas, it will be in the shoulders and in the hands. Shall we try this? With me. Can you hear the difference? Immediately, there's They're together. Let's keep going. Thank you for that. We've already solved one problem. And the problem was not that they weren't watching me. The problem was that they weren't feeling the pulse. Here's a very complex academic quote. What it basically means is, if you're moving two, you'll feel it a lot more. And we have further research from two researchers, Wiltermuth and Heath, that say that people who synchronize, deliberately synchronize their physical gestures will find that there's a social bonding effect. So by the act of working with me, not please follow me, please watch me, but let's give a downbeat together, we can coordinate very effectively and very quickly. This works for pretty much every instrumental group and choral ensemble I have ever tried it with. The message is, don't react to me, reflect what I'm doing, let's give that downbeat together. What we're not doing well is the third measure. Everybody has a different idea of what that note length is going to be. So I'm going to ask you to do something fairly straightforward. We're going to play it again from the beginning. Please simply agree what that note length will be in the third measure on the eighth notes. From the top. It's a lot closer. Did I tell them to make it shorter or longer? The only thing I asked them for was agreement. We're not quite there stylistically. Can I get a volunteer from the front desk, please, of each section, just to play measure 3, beats 2, 3, and 4. Volunteer, Marissa, thank you. Second violinist, here we are. And 1. Can you try one more time? You just want to go on, that's fine, we will go on. This is going to be frustrating, we're going to stop a lot here. Don't stop a lot in rehearsal, let them play, let them play. Try one more time. 3, 4, 1. Already much closer. Can we try 2 desks, please? Sorry, not 2 desks, the full first desk. 3, 4, 1. Not quite agreeing. One more time. 3, 4, 1. Much closer. Everyone, can we try it? Really listen here. 3, 4, 1. Move! I surprised you. Sorry, I shouldn't surprise you. I told you I wouldn't. Let's keep going. Measure 3. 3, 4, 1. So already, there's much more agreement in terms of the style and the character of the note, how they're playing it, and where they're playing it. I will point out, in the spirit of academic fairness, there's a little bit of conductor substitution happening. This happens a lot. The moment I stop conducting, they're all eyes gravitate to here. Like, where is it going to be? Where is it going to be? Can you try this for me? I'm going to push you in a really difficult direction. Look at measure 3. You got 4 notes in it. Can you play for me notes 2, 3, and 4 with your eyes closed? 3, 4, 1. So they can achieve the same thing without having to default to a conductor. Can you try it one more time? Really tighten it up in terms of the sound quality. 3, 4, 1. Do you think you can continue with your eyes closed? Measures 3 and 4. Show me what you can do. 3, 4, 1. There we go. Very simple way to avoid conductor substitution. Simple passage, get them to listen, get them to think about it, engage with each other. Then they don't need to follow anybody. We've already done that. The key here, you want them to negotiate, you want them to collaborate, you want them to interact. This happens through our medium. All you have to do is ask them for agreement, and they will find it if you put them in the right place to do it. We're going to look at a more complex example now, one from Villalobos. The Bachianas Brasileiras, number 5, the aria at the beginning. And we're going to start at measure 51. Don't crane your neck to look up there. You're missing a page 51. Do you have 51?
I only have 3 pages and none of them are.
Don't look there. You have rehearsal 51, or measure 51.
Oh, yeah, okay, we're
You do. Great. We tried to simplify things by only giving you the page that you need.
Yeah, but there's no like name on the page, so I.
That didn't simplify, yeah. Fair enough. Here we are. In 5/4. 4, 5. So I'm conducting 5. 60 now. 4 and 5 and. I picked this excerpt because it is difficult. It is complex. There are many different things happening at the same time. We're going to go back and we're going to put it together in a very, very strategic way. Let's look at 51. Can I hear, please, at 51, just the second violins and the bass? 4 and 5 and. I'm not sure if you heard what happened. If you were listening very attentively. The first 2 measures, there was a very active kind of negotiation when they tried to figure out what is happening and how does it all fit together. But by the time they got to the 3rd beat of the first measure, they understood it and then they locked down between the 2 of them. We're going to put another layer in here. We're going to put in the non-solo cellos. Are you ready? Second violin, bass, non-solo cellos. 4 and 5 and. Have you played this before? That's some very fine sight reading, by the way. A lot of chromaticisms there. Thank you for that. I'm going to ask you to play it one more time. Can you please balance it out? Same thing. 4 and 5 and. again, they start off just a little hesitant, and then 4 or 5 measures in, when they start to understand how things are happening, they start to groove. And where we ended up right there, it was grooving. We go, bum, 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 and it was grooving beautifully. Can we bring everybody else in, please? 51. 4 and 5 and. So on our very first run, it was something of a mess. People all over the place, things happening at the wrong time, rhythms not being correct, this floating melody, this contrapuntal thing in the cello which darts, the 16th followed by an 8th followed by a 16th. All of these things were unsettled. All of a sudden now, they're settled. I just let them play. I wanted to see what would happen. We went far, far beyond the part that we'd worked through. But the point here is that, I don't know if you were paying attention, but I had stopped conducting about 3 times earlier, 3 runs earlier. I simply started them, and then I let them go. And there's a very, very important reason for doing this. When I'm conducting, they're abdicating responsibility for both listening and thinking about what is happening around them. When I asked the group to balance, I didn't say, you need to play more and you need to play less. I let them adjudicate that for themselves and find the point that they thought was right. And 99.99% of the time, they do. The times that they don't are the times when the physical acoustic environment makes it very difficult for them to hear themselves. All the rhythmic issues, all these little things, 99.9% of them disappear. And again, I'm not conducting. I just started them. And if you know the score, we have 2 measures in 5/4, then a measure in 3/4, then we've got 2 measures in 3/2, and then it goes into 4/4. So where the bar line is, it's always shifting. And instead of saying, here's the bar line, please follow me, I put them in a situation where they would understand what it was that they were hearing, understand where the pulse was, where the texture was, where the foundations were, and then let them figure out how to sit on top. This is what I mean about rehearsing for comprehension rather than rehearsing for correctness. I could sit there and dictate to them, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you came in too early, your rhythm here was a little loose, please follow me, please watch me. Or we can solve it by process. The process of rehearsing, which in this case was very much one of assembly. And it worked wonderfully, oh thank God. Because you never know, this is a high-risk moment. But it did work, and they did figure it out, and they figured it out without any intervention from me in terms of telling them what to do. Just, why don't we just structure how we're going to do it in a different way? We're going to throw them off the deep end now. We're going to go from easier to harder to harder. Back to Mozart, please. Symphony number 38, Prague. We're going to look at the allegro in the first movement. Syncopation. I'm going to conduct this. I chose these works because I knew this was going to happen. So the fact that you did it is no reflection on you. Do not worry about it. Let's try it again. 1 and 2 and. desk, but they've got the shape of it. We're going to take this apart. Can I get just one person from each desk to play? One person from each section. 1 and 2 and. Why don't we try that one more time? That'll give you another chance to figure out how it's done. Try it again. 1 and 2 and. That's already a whole lot closer. Again, my hands are down here. Can I ask you just to play it again? Just for the fun of it. Please. One more time. Just one more time. There is method to my madness. I will explain it in just a moment. 1 and 2 and. So you can hear each time there's a little bit of negotiation happening. They're still trying to work out exactly how to fit it in. This is not a problem. How about the first desk of each section? Same thing. Let's try it again. 1 and 2 and. We do everybody? Please. 1 and 2 and. So my hands are down here. I'm not conducting for them. I'm not telling them how to play it. I was hoping, if you were listening very intently, and when I had just the quartet playing, something really interesting happened. And these are the four C's, as I call them. C prime. First step is comprehension. They need to understand how everything is going to fit together and where their roles are. And the best way for them to do that is through hearing it themselves, rather than me trying to explain it. C2, coordination, negotiation. This is process. That was when they were sitting there trying to figure out, okay, wait a second, this is syncopation. How do my notes on the beat line up with the syncopations that I'm hearing from the first violin? C3, consolidation. Aha, I get it, I understand it. Now I'm just going to reinforce it with a little bit of repetition. And then the best part, for which I thank you very sincerely, is C4, when we get to creation. And if you were listening very intently to the quartet, when I asked them, I said, there's method to my madness, just try it one more time. It's because they were on the cusp, on the very verge of getting to the point where they were starting to play not like orchestral musicians that very first time. I'm playing my note. Are you happy, maestro? You happy, maestro? But they were injecting it with personality and style and characteristic. And they were shaping the notes, and they were shaping the notes in the left hand and in the bow hand. They were articulating them differently. I never asked them to do any of that. The point here is that if you clarify the problem so that their attention is focused on it in just the right way, the orchestra will solve it itself. Sometimes an intervention is required. It's very rarely required. Sometimes an intervention is required. And that is when you do step in. But otherwise, it really is a question of peeling back the layers, exposing the nature of the problem, and letting them hear and work it out themselves. And when you put them in that position, you give them opportunity, and they took it unbidden. They took the opportunity to create something different. Yes, this is the music of dead, white European males. This is a very traditional, institutionalized, embedded ensemble, and at the same time, there's room and there's space for them to bring their own creative instinct, their own creative ideas to the table. And they did it. And they did it without being asked to. No one said it's time to be creative now. Make it prettier. It simply happened. Want to try something a little more challenging? No. Can we look at the Rossini excerpt, please? We're going to start at rehearsal, letter H, I think it was. Shall we? Maybe I'm just a really, really bad conductor. But the moment I start trying to conduct them, things start getting further off track rhythmically. They started falling apart, and it's not difficult rhythmically. It really isn't. The moment I step out and leave them to function as a group of checks and balances against each other, they start focusing in on what's really important, which is maintaining the rhythm. We're going to go back to H, please. And now, just for the sake of drama, I'm going to start you, and I'd like you to get faster. 3, 4. They got faster. That was all I had to do. How much faster can you go? Let's find out. Let's push to the limit of what is possible here. I'll start you again. Back at H. 3, 4. Intervention. That there is a certain critical space in which the orchestra can move itself, and sometimes you want to push something a little bit extra out of them. You can, and that is the moment when I think a conductor can be effective. But the fact of the matter is we delude ourselves into thinking that we need conductors to do pretty much everything with the orchestra, that the conductor has to stand and give a downbeat. And then if there's a tempo transition, if we're going to speed up, if we're going to slow down, that it has to be centrally coordinated. And this is false. This is simply not true. All these things can be affected by the musicians, provided that they're given time and space to understand the relationships within the music the interdependencies. They're given time to consolidate that knowledge after they go through a process of negotiation. And sometimes the negotiation, the collaboration, all of that happens at the same time. And then finally the creative phase, when they are fully able to do things that you might not think would be possible otherwise. How are we doing for time, Brian? We started with
We're doing well.
We're doing well.
Yep.
Can I try one more thing?
Yep.
I'm going to throw you off the deep end. Let's go back to Mozart, 38. First movement, first note. We're just going to look at the very, very first note. This is where you go from being low risk to very, very high risk. So I'm going to start there. I'd like to try something with you. We're going to give that downbeat the way we were giving it before, physically. What I need you to do at the same time is I need you to breathe, as if you're a trumpet player or a horn player or a tuba player. Yeah, those Mozart tubas. I need to have from you, please, an audible inhalation. Now, if you've got cold or bad allergies, like I've got bad allergies happening right now, best not to sniff. It might sound a little weird, but just let's try it. First note of the Mozart. Great. Can you do the same thing? With your eyes closed, please. That's pretty darn close, by the way. The reason I'm asking them to close their eyes is to avoid conductor substitution syndrome. If I walk off stage, they're all going to look at her. Ariel, right? Yes, I got it right. And if I say, Ariel, you're going to walk on stage with me, they will look at Rebecca. And they will find somebody to look at and go, please lead me. And then you take that out. You take that off the table and say, I want you to try this. Close your eyes, deliver for me a downbeat. They came pretty close. I'm sure we can do better. Also pretty close. Could somebody, I'm inviting a comment now, could somebody describe what they might have heard happen on the stage? You might not be able to hear this.
Breathe.
Well, it wasn't quite together. Did you hear what happened in the breath?
They didn't breathe, so let's when you had them close their eyes, Sam gave the breath and they all breathed collectively.
So we have conductor, a little bit of conductor substitution. People are trying to lead it, but it's still not quite accurate. We're still not quite there. Here's what I want you to try. Try one more time, close your eyes. And I need you to agree in your breath where that downbeat is going to be. Okay, did you hear that? Much, much closer. Keep in mind they're doing this blind. This is done through acoustic means alone, what they're hearing on stage. Did you hear what happened? Again, you may not be able to hear it back there. I'm sitting here, right here. It's very easy for me to hear.
The breath was more in time as an upbeat.
Which one?
The anticipatory breath. Before it was too short, it wasn't within the pulse of the bar.
I think it's a very good observation. There is no pulse in the first note. It's just simply a note. There's no establishment of meter or rhythm. So it doesn't have to be in time. It just has to be together. What I heard, and which you may not be able to hear, is a ripple effect of breath happening at different times in the ensemble. This is very normal. It's because we as human beings measure time differently from one another. We all have a different conception of time. The first breath kind of worked because our bass player led the process. What was his name, sir? Sam led the process. But here's the amazing thing about this. You can start, but you can't carry them over the finish line. The reason why it didn't work properly, he led them, He started them and he tried to lead them over the finish line. He didn't have everyone with him. The third time we tried it, when I asked him to agree, I call this the anti-gravity effect of breathing. That they breathe all at different times because they're all responding in different ways to what they're hearing around them. But they find consensus somewhere in the breath and then deliver a downbeat very close to where it needs to be. Almost perfect, almost perfect. I call it anti-gravity because it's like having 15 balls in your hands, throwing them all in the air at different times, at different heights and at different speeds, and having them all land at exactly the same moment. So even the myth, or even the idea that we need a conductor to start, is something of a myth. It doesn't have to happen. So why bother? Why bother with this approach? Why bother with this idea when we know, as a matter of our symphonic industry reality, that we can get good results with a conductor? This has to do with a social objective, and a distinct social objective, one of empathy. We have a technical term, because academics have a technical term for everything, for the mental space in which musicians are at the most connected. It's called empathetic attunement. When musicians feel like they are entirely liberated to do almost anything, and they know in full confidence that they will be with the orchestra and the orchestra will be with them, that their peers, their colleagues, their collaborators will go with them without even a second thought. It doesn't happen very often. We know it exists because chamber musicians in particular, they talk about achieving this, if you want to call it, higher consciousness. A different plane of thinking and collaborating. We know it exists. The question is, how do we get to it? What are the key conditions that are required to getting to it? The key condition, we've identified this in the literature on empathy. Piaget called it decentering. It's the process of relinquishing just a little bit of autonomy and a little bit of agency and a little bit of self-interest to the group. And that is exactly what you hear in the breath. When they take a collective breath together, the idea that maybe I can start it, but I can't finish it. I can initiate this process, but I have to make sure people are with me before it reaches its conclusion. And the only way that is accomplished is through, in this medium, very intensive listening. This is not about me telling people what to do. I'm managing a process. I'm not dictating a product. I'm not telling them how long the note has to be. I'm not telling them who's late. I'm not telling them who's early. I'm not telling them to make their sound prettier or to shape notes in a particular way. I'm putting them in a space where they can hear each other, understand each other, and take steps towards that level of cohesion and to that empathetic attunement. For me personally, given the restrictions of the genre, given the restrictions of the medium, this is one of the best things I believe I can do with it the way it is right now. It isn't limited to this instrumental group. It is not an orchestral phenomenon. Any group of musicians working together can do it. It is not restricted to genre. If you take this approach with hip-hop or jazz, yes, this is my medium, this is what I'm comfortable with, but it is not limited only to this medium. The question is, how do we put things together? How do we emphasize relationships? How do we get them to think about what they're doing in terms of what other people are doing, to negotiate and collaborate, never having opened their mouths? They didn't turn to each other, and at no point did they say, I think it needs to be shorter. I think it needs to be longer. Or who's going to lead the accelerando? Who's going to take the initiative here? It never happened. I simply asked them to do it, and they found a way to do it. Giving them time and space to negotiate, to collaborate, consolidate, and then ultimately create. I'm not going to pretend this is the perfect solution. And having gone through the step with the orchestra, I think I'm going to step back now and encourage them through moderation. I mean, we may have an intervening step here, but to give their feedback and respond to you. So I'm going to take myself out of the picture further. But let me say one last thing. I think Sistema has a real problem with conductors, that we look to them far too often. The Venezuelan model, Eduardo Mendez came out and said, we are in the business of developing conductors. I'm a conductor, this is my livelihood, but I'm not in that business. I'm in the business of trying to find ways to make my medium an effective one for social change. And if we're going to be conductor-centric, I can guarantee one thing, we're not going to have the social change through the ensemble that we want. I'm going to hand over to Brian.
So, actually, I think this is a great point. I would love to hear from some of the people on the stage about this process and what you just experienced. Is anyone willing to share just a comment of what this process was like for them? Yes, Haley. Would you be willing to stand just so people can hear you?
So first I felt hesitant because doing things without a conductor is of course not habitual at all for me as a violinist. I'm used to being told to follow and being told to do exactly what the conductor is asking me to do. So I was hesitant at first, and even the first few times I wasn't really sure, but it was interesting how much more comfort I experienced. My comfort level really rose as I continued through the different exercises. I could feel that I was going to be with the group, that I wasn't going to be the odd one out.
Is anyone else willing to share a little bit about their experience? It's tough.
Maybe I could invite one of the UNC Charlotte students to talk about, they've worked with me for a longer period of time. They could talk about their initial reaction and reception and how that might have changed or gotten worse. I make no assumptions. I've told them they have carte blanche to say whatever they want to say.
I've been lucky to work with Dr. Govias since he first came to University of North Carolina, Charlotte 3 years ago. And I think it was our first or second rehearsal that you put us through the downbeat with your eyes closed. And frankly, it was terrible. And we hated it, and it was so uncomfortable because it took you from a place of feeling like you could be successful. The conductor is conducting you. All you have to do is do what you're told and it'll work. And it puts you in a situation where all of a sudden you're not sure what's going to happen. And that's very uncomfortable. But interestingly enough, it also levels the playing field in a unique way because I'm most certainly not the best violinist in our department, in our violin studio. And our concert master, for instance, is a very, very good violinist. And she has more trouble with this than I do. And so it levels the playing field with people with perhaps different playing abilities. You can pull on your other strengths, your listening strengths and your attunement strengths. So that makes it a really unique experience as a student.
Fantastic. Can we just get one more round of applause for this group?
Did anybody hate it? Please tell me if you did.
I thought it was interesting. I thought it was kind of fun to do it this way. It was different.
Let me ask you, would it be better if I were to conduct it?
It would probably sound better, maybe. Possibly, I'm not sure, but I did enjoy exploring this different way of approaching the music.
Yeah.
I think it works especially well because we're sight reading, and when you're sight reading, you can't really look at the conductor anyway. And so I feel like it's a more effective approach to beginning something new than having to rely on somebody that you kind of by definition can't really spend a lot of time looking at the conductor for the cue and watching for the accelerandos and everything. You really have to be more in tune with the people you're playing with. And what I found was that typically when I'm playing in an orchestra, especially if I happen to be sitting in the front, I'm not really noticing anybody else around me at all, and I'm not really thinking about who's behind me and who's beside me. I'm just in my music and I'm with the conductor, and that's pretty much it. But I found myself being much more aware of who's even in the room with me, because I'm not usually paying attention to that, and it opened up the possibilities for what it can accomplish with the other musicians.
Can I just ask a UNC Charlotte student to tell the assembled how many times in the last 3 years I've asked the orchestra to watch me or to look at me, please? That's not true. That's not quite true. By my count, in the last 3 years, I've asked the orchestra to watch me 3 times, and that was during an opera production. So I don't feel too bad about having them do that. What I find very interesting about what you're saying is that's really the point, to get you connected to what the people around you are playing. The very first thing I teach my conducting class, they're way too busy to look up. So don't fight it. Don't fight the process. Don't tell them to look up. Tell them to work with each other.
So I think one thing about this, it's sort of a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, if you're not having a conductor conduct all the time, so it's not like you're on autopilot just following the conductor, I think that gets the students a lot more, you have to think for yourself, and you have to be mentally engaged, not just as in the technique for your instrument, but as in thinking about the others around you and thinking, okay, how's this going to work? What kind of strategy we're going to use? Even if that's not something you're aware that you're thinking, those thoughts are going to have to go through your head so that as a group you come up with some kind of collective, how are we going to do this? So that it doesn't sound bad. But that involves people being invested in it not sounding bad. So you may think that by giving the students that kind of agency and that kind of thought development, that's great if they have a vested interest in it being successful. So I think it requires 2 commitments, which is first of all to allow the students to have that space and that space to grow intellectually and not just as a musician, but also they have to want it, and building that up is a second battle.
Can we take just 2 minutes just to write a thought about that in your TEJ, and then we're going to go right to our panel over here. Just take 2 minutes to reflect on